Section 3 of The Romance of an Old Fool. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Romance of an Old Fool by Roswell Field. Section 3. My good friends, I said, don't let this disturb you for a minute. I am not so pressed for time that I cannot wait on your reasonable convenience. Your tavern is well kept, and the food is wholesome. I think I may say that my old friends in Meadowvale will interest me until we can come to an amicable understanding. Suppose, to be sure of a full meeting, that we fix the time of conference at day after tomorrow, a little late in the afternoon. After this suggestion had been received with suitable expressions of gratitude, we journeyed together to the village, where I was duly turned over to old Pettigrew. And then, as the day was by no means done, I strolled down the street and, most naturally and quite unthinkingly, found myself a few minutes later looking over the Eastman gate at Phyllis on the porch. To say that this charming girl was surprised by my sudden appearance was no less true than to admit that she did not seem in the least displeased. I positively had no intention of going in, but before I knew it, I was sitting beside her, relating in the most casual way the reason of my coming. "How good it was of you," said the ingenious creature, "and how delighted and grateful Meadowvale will be. It must be glorious to be rich enough to do things for other people. Now, it is not a disagreeable sensation to feel that one is rich and good and glorious in the large gray eyes of a very pretty woman, and I was conscious of the mild intoxication from the compliment. "It is, indeed," I answered magnanimously. "I have always maintained that money is given to us in trust for those around us, and that in making others happy we find our greatest happiness. I regret that I have not wholly lived up to this undeniably correct principle." "It will require at least $1,000, she said naively. "Oh, at least." She was silent a moment. Then she said, "I was wondering what I would do if I had $1,000 to give away." "What do you think you would do?" "Speaking for my own preferences, I think I should like to establish a country club." "The very thing. If there is one crying want more than another in Meadowvale, it is a country club, with golf links, tennis courts, and shower baths." "Now you are laughing at me." "Not at all. Fancy old Hank and you playing a foursome with Aunt Mary and me for the cider and apples. Why, it would add years of robustness to our waning lives." "No," said the girl decisively, "it isn't feasible." "Then," I went on musingly, "we might have an art institute, or the Phyllis Kinglake School of Expression, or the Meadowvale Women's Club, or the Colonial Dames, or, best of all, the Daughters of the American Revolution." "That shows how little you appreciate the local situation," she responded quickly. "For your best of all is worse and worse. Imagine an order of daughters in a place where every woman's ancestors did nothing but fight in the Revolution. As well call a town meeting at once." "Ah," with a sigh, "I see that I shall never spend the $1,000 in Meadowvale." "Don't be too sure of that, my dear Phyllis," I exclaimed in an outburst, for I was in a particularly happy and generous mood. "And remember that when you do decide how the money is to be philanthropically invested, we shall see that it is forthcoming." With such agreeable banter the minutes slipped away, and when Mary appeared with the customary invitation to tea, it would have been a jolt to the harmonious order of things to decline. I cannot say that I have ever cordially approved the austerity of the New England tea table, with its cold bread and biscuits, its applesauce, its frugal allowance of sardines, its basket of cake, and its not very stimulating pot of tea. But such are the compensations of pleasant society that even these chilly viands may be forgotten, and I say my Amen to Phyllis's sweet and modest grace with all the heartiness of a thankful man. As no gentleman may, with propriety, run away immediately after he has accepted hospitality, I lingered in the evening, and we had more music, which so calmed and rested me that I wondered at my past nervousness, and marveled that I had even contemplated a journey across the water. How it came about that the next morning Phyllis and I were strolling over the village, down by the river and into the pleasant woods, I have forgotten. But I dare say that we were discussing further developments of philanthropy, and endeavoring to come to a conclusion as to the proper disposition of that troublesome $1,000. The girl was so young and joyous, so pretty, so arch, so fascinating, with that little coquettishness that is not the usual type of the Puritan maiden. I could not find it in my heart to remember Mary's words and try to instill in her a closer appreciation of the more serious purposes of life. Indeed, life is so serious that it is one of the blessed decrees of Mother Nature that we have that brief allotment of time when it is too serious to think about. And youth passes so quickly that it is criminal to rob it of its golden hour. In such a presence I felt my own spirits rising, my step becoming springy, my whole nature less sluggish. And had I looked in the mirror, I should have confidently expected to see a youthful bloom in my cheeks and a return of hair to primary conditions. It is due to this interesting young woman to say that she coyly urged me not to forget my other friends, since I was to leave so soon, and it pleased me to fancy that she was not altogether offended when I spoke somewhat hastily, and rather flippantly, of those of my former companions who had lapsed into tediousness. I reminded her also that, as the happiest memory of my childhood was associated with her mother, so it was sweet to me to be with her and live again, in a pleasant dream, the brightness of the past. Then, for her mother's sake, she shyly let me take her hand while I went over again, not without emotion, the story of my early love. Dear little Sylvie. The meeting of the committee was followed by a general congregation of citizens, and I was invited to the platform, where I outlined my plan. I hinted that the library was merely the beginning of a number of beneficences which I desired to contribute to Meadowvale's prosperity, and as I looked down upon my listeners and caught sight of Phyllis, glancing up with flushed cheeks and sparkling eyes, I was nearly betrayed into promises of the most preposterous nature. At the end of my remarks, I recall that I spoke with unusual grace and eloquence. The chairman stood up and gravely thanked me, intimating that I was a credit to Meadowvale and its perfect public school system. I fancy I should have been applauded if it had been compatible with the nature of the people of Meadowvale to make so riotous a demonstration. At the close of the meeting, it happened, by the purest accident, that I walked home with Mary and Phyllis, and when Mary said in her blunt way that I really had been most generous, Phyllis did not speak, but she slipped her hand under my arm and gave me an appreciative little squeeze, which made me regret that I had not pledged another $1,000. I was to leave the next morning, thanks to the officious members of the committee, who had so blunderingly hurried matters to accommodate me that I had no longer an excuse of remaining. And it was for this reason that I went in and sat again in the little parlor, while Phyllis sang for me the songs that were my favorites, and some her mother sang in the long ago. Memories were again pleasantly stirred within me, as was not infrequent in those days, and I experienced all the happiness that comes to him who is persuaded that he has made himself a little above the ordinary attractions of the earth. In this excess of good feeling, and stimulated alike by the music and the consciousness of a philanthropic impulse, I waited until the moment of parting before declaring definitely my excellent intentions. "My dear Mary," I began, turning to that admirable spinster, "you know how our childhood was linked by a close family feeling, and how you and Sylvia and I planned in our simple ambitions to live together in the great world outside. We may say now that this was childish romance, and that the caprice of time has made it an idle fancy. For many years we have been separated, and only by a happy chance have we been brought together. Fortune has been kind to me. I am called a rich man, and I believe I may say without boasting that I am far beyond the need of anxiety. But to a degree I am a lonely man. My sister's child is my one near relative in the world, and he is a young man with an excellent business, able to take care of himself, and naturally engrossed with his own occupations. You can understand that at my time of life, alone as I am, and still young enough to appreciate the joys of living, I have a feeling of desolation for which no riches can compensate. Had fortune given me a daughter, like our Phyllis here, I think no happiness could have been so great. It has pleased me to look back upon the past, to recall the days of our childhood, and to see in Phyllis the image of her mother. Why can I not link the present and the future with the past? Why can I not look on Phyllis as my own daughter, and give to her all the father love I have learned to feel? I do not rob you either of her love or her presence. I merely add a new joy to my life, and know that in caring for you both, and in contributing to her happiness, and securing her against misfortune after we are taken away, I am carrying out the pledge, however idle at the time, I made to Sylvia." I fancied I saw what may have been the suspicion of a tear in Mary Eastman's eye. It vanished as quickly as it came, and when she spoke and thanked me for my generous offer, her voice was as calm and her manner as collected as if I had made a casual suggestion for attendance at a prayer meeting. She could not deny that the opportunity was too enticing to be ignored, and she admitted that my fatherly proposition was distinctly advantageous. Her New England independence rather revolted at the thought of any immediate financial assistance, which was not needed, while her New England thrift approved a future settlement based on family friendliness of many years' standing. On the whole, she was inclined to be favorable to my point of view. As for Phyllis, she had listened to me with undisguised amazement. Her big gray eyes had grown larger, and the color left her cheeks as I finished. Then the rosy red rushed back, her lip quivered, and the tears sprang to her eyes. A moment later she smiled, then laughed, and was serious again. How incomprehensible are these young girls! Poor child! She had never known a father's love. Phyllis followed me to the door. The light, streaming from the parlor, shone squarely on her exquisite face. A thrill of pleasure went through me, as I realized that at last I had a daughter whom I could love and cherish. I took her hand in both of mine, and as I released it, I parted the light, wavy hair and kissed her forehead. It seemed to me that she trembled slightly, but in a moment she was herself, and a gleam of merriment was in her eyes as she said, "Of course, you will write to me, Papa?" Doubtless, the novelty of the situation made me just a little embarrassed. To be called Papa the first time by a pretty girl was more embarrassing than I had expected. And why that half-laugh in her eye, and why that almost quizzical tone? Was I not kind and good enough to be her father? And had I not tried to show her every paternal consideration? Was I not honestly endeavoring to fulfill a sacred pledge? I was perplexed, but not discouraged. I will prove to her, I said to myself with firmness, that I am entirely worthy of her filial affection, and that she may lean confidently upon me. And I went straightway to bed and dreamed of her all night, as every true father should dream of the daughter of his heart and his home. End of section 3. Recorded by Roger